Hi, folks. Wanted to welcome everyone to our first edition of the Agile at Scale meetup that is hybrid. We have been running virtually since the pandemic started in March of 2020, and we've had a lot of engaging sessions on Zoom, but this is now our first hybrid meetup. That means is our speaker, Clementino, and a number of folks are basically the uh, in a room at a location in Round Rock, I believe. Super excited for this. This is going to be great. Of course, we have a few things that we normally cover about Agile Austin at first, since that is the organization that sponsors this special interest group. Our mission is to connect people and foster professional growth through collaborative events such as this one. Yeah, we've got a lot of other special interest groups that we'll go over here in a moment. This is our 2022-2023 board. And yes, that is me. I am the Chief Technology Officer, along with all the other officers you see here on the screen. It's been a great organization I've been a part of for many years, and you can always contact us at board@agileaustin.org if you have any questions or anything that you would like to work on in conjunction with us. And speaking of that, we have sponsors. Our platinum sponsor, Retrospectives, offers a tool to help you through retrospectives. Ad Meloria Coaching, WellSky 321 Gang. We're very thankful for all the sponsors that make it possible for us to hold events like this. And we are always looking for new sponsors, so you can reach out to contact@agileaustin.org or our website. And membership also helps sustain the organization. Membership fee has stayed the same at $35 a year. You get discounts to our annual conference, access to recordings of those presentations, as well as discounts on and reimbursement if you join our book club, various other benefits as well described at our website. So check it out. Would love for you to become a member and to continue to help us continue on at the organization. As mentioned earlier, we have a bunch of special interest groups. So not just this Agile at Scale SIG, but leaders, coaching, Scrum Master, the aforementioned book club, Lean Kanban, a lot of good stuff going on. And we're always looking for new SIGs and expanding. So if you're interested in having another one on the books, feel free to reach out to us. We're also looking for just volunteers in general. I'm also part of our social media committee. We could always use more people on that as just one example. And we're also looking for a director of volunteers to help guide and expand the number of things that we can do, because we're always looking to continue education within the Agile community. So again, contact us at contact@agileaustin.org if you're interested. About this meetup, Leland Newsom started it way back in 2016, so going on 7 years now, and I joined him as the co-lead in 2020, and we're both passionate Agilists. Our upcoming events, we've got Yuval Uret on OKRs and Agile sitting on a tree in March 2023. In April and May, TBD. So if you have a topic you'd like to present on or know of a good speaker who would like to present, we're always looking for hybrid opportunities. So Austin area speakers, or also national and international ones will work as well for online events. But yep, so looking for more folks. For today's session, Clementino will be talking to us about trunk-based development and how to be effective with it. And as you can see there, he's got extensive industry experience and a lot of good things that he's done over the years. So really looking forward to today's presentation. And those are our email addresses if you want to get in touch with us. Leland Newsom at agileaustin.org or Ben Rogers at agileaustin.org, and would love to hear about either new ideas for the SIG or new presenters. And so with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and I will hand this over to Clementino. So Clementino, thanks for joining us today, and go for it. And you are on mute. There you go.
Yeah, the reason, we're checking here because I got one microphone for the computer for the presentation and another for the room, but evidently the one for the room isn't on.
Right.
Give me just a sec.
And
All right.
Oh, you have to turn it on, obviously.
yes. And
Can
then
you guys hear me?
Unmute as well. Unmute as well.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. And in the room, can you hear me out in the back? All right.
You need to put the mic up.
Put the mic up and use your voice. I'm going to use my inner voice. All right. Hopefully it's better now. Well, thank you, everyone. Welcome here. And thank you, by the way, Emerson, for the great lunch. This is VIP treatment. Nice room. Wow, 2 screens. Excellent. Thank you very much. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Will be the presentation. And we're still trying out to see if this will show up in case I do the presentation. So let me see here. Typically, I will do those presentations with an extra window.
Oops. So it looks like we lost Clementino there. Yeah, let's see if we can get him back. So thanks for bearing with us. This is our first hybrid event. Clementino, there you are.
Yeah, we did have a technical glitch, or not a technical, but a network glitch here. If that happens, Leland is going to let me know if the connection with the meeting is stopped, and then I'll make a pause and then continue. Sorry for that. We don't have any control over this on my side. Quick question is, can you see my shared screen?
Not right now, no.
Yeah.
I think you're going to have to probably reshare it.
And I know because I now put it on the maximize mode and I'll share it. Can you see it now?
Yes.
All right. Well, trunk-based development, how to be effective with it. I'm working with Microsoft right now more on the DevOps and machine learning operations side. I'm currently an Azure technical trainer, also working or doubling as an Azure platform evangelist with my activities. In the past, I've done anything that relates to software development in general. I've been a manager, a developer, an architect, process architect, worked for about 10 years with ALM. Actually, when I was a colleague of Leland's at Schwab, or right after that, I don't remember exactly when, Leland, but that was in 2016, we started this Agile at Scale particular interest group. I was always interested on Agile, but at scale. And this presentation has to do with the scalability of using the trunk-based development, right? I'm currently working more on the machine learning operations, but this also applies to other types of efforts. And I'm interested in hearing from the Emerson, whoever works with Emerson here, about your own experiences in dealing with this, because I know that some of the things I'll be talking about, they are really related to software or soft software development, and you guys work with hard software development, right? Different life cycles and so on. Well, Trunk-based development, and that grinning there is because I'm going to be referring to it as TBD. Well, it's an unfortunate coincidence in the acronym. The definition comes from this particular location or website, trunkbaseddevelopment.com. Anything you want to know about trunk-based development is in there. The author is excellent. As a matter of fact, this guy is a specialist who wrote a book, who can buy the book, but he made his website into a book, or vice versa, I don't know. And over the years, I've seen that he has summarized things that people talk about everywhere. I will be referring to some of his ideas. I've got the 2 diagrams from his stuff. So therefore, I'm using also the definition that he has in his book/website. What is trunk-based development? A source control branching model where developers collaborate on code in a single branch called trunk or main, if you're using Git, and resist any pressure to create other long-lived development branches by employing documented techniques. They therefore avoid merge hell, they do not break the build, and they live happily ever after. I wish that was true. So there you go. Your first reference is trunkbaseddevelopment.com for everything that I'll be talking about here on the side. But he doesn't mention one thing on his side, or he doesn't emphasize something, and that's what I'll be emphasizing here in this conversation. I'll go over some of the concepts, and then I'll have Q&A time at the end. So let's just go over. Let's think of this as a brainstorming about this, right? So what is trunk-based development in the small? And this is taken directly from his book. You have basically everybody working in the same branch. Developers, they do not commit to any long-term release branches. And each committer, right, if you're using Agile, preferably a pair programming duo, will be working in a stream of small commits. Small commits is an important thing to talk about, right? The idea is that one commit per task. A task might involve you modifying 10 files or 100 files, or it could be a whole project, but it is a task. And tasks typically would be something that you can do within a period of 1 hour, 2 hours, 4, 6, 8, 16 to the max. If anything is bigger than 16 hours, you might want to consider breaking it down. And this is a general rule that has existed in the industry, with Agile since the early days. The XP or the other methods, Scrum, they always talked about this, is that you should think of tasks as something that can be done in a smaller time frame and not the whole iteration. I've been in some companies where the task was the whole two weeks, one task from the beginning to the end, and then they dumped all the commits at the very end. Imagine the problem for integration. That is now gone. Nobody does that anymore unless they have not been through some Agile training. So in the small, that's how trunk development starts. That's what we do. That's what we do as individual developers. Most likely, some of you here are working on a single person projects. Is anyone here working on a single person project? Meaning you are the only person in the project. Anyone? Like you, I've been in rooms where the whole room basically raised their hands. And it was kind of interesting. Not only they did work on single, they were the single person in the project, they were working on several projects. Yeah, and I can tell you that this was a public company, and I won't give you the name, but it was an interesting situation there. So in the small teams, they will use this. There are many implementations of this. One of them is typically, for instance, GitHub Flow, right? So GitHub Flow, you would have the initial commit there. You have, well, first of all, you have master there, and you have the initial branch. You create that initial little branch for your own personal work. You do whatever you need to do there. And then remember, this is main here, right? Or trunk. Then I have my own task related work that I will do, and I will be doing local commits to my own local cloned section of the code. Then I do a final merge of my local commits into my local temporary branch. I will do a pull request at this point. Let me do an, yeah, I'll do a pull request at this point. And then people will start to review. That's what those little icons for conversations are related to. I'll fix my local code based on those pull request commits. And then I will deploy. The reason why we have a squirrel as the deployment symbol is because there is a tool called Squirrel that can be used for deployments. And this is, the original GitHub flow before GitHub was, bought by Microsoft and so on. This is what was in their website. Notice that the description of their website actually said that you had to deploy to production at this point of where the squirrel is in, and then test. And if it works in production, then you commit it to main or to trunk, right? This final commit here is only done after you do the validation of that code somewhere. A lot of teams had problems with that because that doesn't work in the large. As a matter of fact, this is the current GitHub flow after GitHub Enterprise started to be sold and so on. Notice that I don't force, or I don't have as a rule that you have to deploy to production first to follow GitHub flow, right? There are obviously some implications there. And if you look into the definition that we saw over here, you need to have some kind of a build first, at the least, and the build must pass. Some teams call this a gated check-in or a gated commit, where it'll have to be tested first. Now, as I said, GitHub took it to the next level. You have to also deploy it. You have to have it deployed somewhere and test it in that deployment. So over the years, there was this conflict between the small and the large, because how do you deploy an application that has, 120 microservices and then test that before I can actually put anything into main or trunk? Simply not possible. That's why this pushback, and why now this is the current definition of GitHub flow that you can get from the websites. And you'll see that it sort of matches what we're trying to do here in terms of a general validation. Now, the author of our reference website, he actually talks about it in the large as well. As a matter of fact, I could teach a whole class based on the first page of his book where he summarizes all this, right? Trunk-based development at scale is best done with short-lived feature branches. That's the current best practice. One person over a couple of days, max 16 hours, right, worth of work. And flowing through a pull request style code review and build automation, still all right, before integrating or merging into the trunk. Now, notice that this definition in the previous one talks about build automation code reviews, but none of them do like GitHub, the original GitHub flow, and talk about deploying anywhere, right? Here I'm also, if I'm going back, you see here that I'm talking about build first, which must pass, right? And a build here is a representative of continuous integration, meaning that I'm using continuous integration, and integration implies that has got to be some testing done. Because if there are no tests in the build or unit tests, then it's not continuous integration. It is just continuous building, and we don't want to do that. I noticed that sometimes when I go to some companies, people have forgotten that about the Agile Manifesto. I'll come back to that in a minute. So the main rule about TBD, right, trunk-based development, keep main pristine. That is, keep the main branch in a pristine, known good state as a trustworthy source of truth of what is in production. That is what main is supposed to be. Why do we branch? Well, we want to have things done in parallel. And if I want to keep that pristine main branch, that main branch pristine, I don't want to disturb it. So I need, for instance, to create a new feature, but main is already pristine. I don't want to break it down. Well, create a new branch and do the development of that new feature over there. Or I want to do maybe a feature fix or a bug fix or a hot fix, whatever way you call it. You don't want to do that in main. You want to keep it pristine. You want to keep it as a representation of what is in production, right? Well, other reasons that we do branch, besides features, creating features in parallel or building fixes in parallel, is to also stabilize the code. I'm not really developing anything, but now we need to primarily stabilize what we have done over the past 6 months. It was very common at Microsoft for a while. We called that a stabilization phase, and it was in part of Microsoft Solutions Framework a long time ago. You would do development for 6 months, and then you would have a month to stabilize. Each iteration was about a month or 3 weeks in. But then what would happen is that a lot of developers would just put the bugs under the carpet. We know that we're going to be a stabilization phase anyway, and there were a lot of accumulated bugs. Around 2009, Microsoft decided that that was not agile enough, and they did away with this stabilization phase exactly by using some of the techniques that we'll be talking about in the next few slides. There are consequences about the branch model that you choose. And I want to emphasize that every branching decision is a business decision. There are technical implications. So you have to understand your business as a manager to help your team decide what they want to do. What happens if your testing cycles, they require you to do manual testing? Well, in most companies, this is dealt with the idea that, well, it's going to take me, my iterations are 2 weeks, but it takes me about a month to do manual testing of the whole system. All of you have been through that situation where testing starts small and I can test my system in a day, and then it becomes 2 days, and then it becomes a whole week. And then suddenly I'm having to use a whole 2 weeks of testing. And then suddenly I can't test manually anymore unless I actually have an extra sprint to do that testing. What happens then is that you start now to do end of iterations or deliveries, which are not yet fully tested, which is not agile, right? So when you go over an iteration and you deliver software that hasn't been tested, that is not agile. That is against the original Agile Manifesto ideas. Now, Git flow, and the author, Dixon, he has made this very nice post, and then he updated it 10 years later. So this idea of Git flow, and I'm showing the exact diagram that comes from his original article, was a way for people that were new to Git to adapt to using Git as a tool, but still keeping the older way of business way of dealing with systems. A lot of you will recognize everything that I'm talking about, especially if you're a Subversion user. Up until 2016, I was in a presentation by the guys from PayPal. they are big users, or they were big users of Subversion at the time. And they were able to deal with those feature branches that we can see here on purple or pink on the side, right? Those are feature branches. And every time that you needed to do a new feature and do it in parallel, you would create a new branch and have that long-term branch going on there. Git flow is about, you only have two permanent branches. You have develop and you have master. Master is pristine, is the representation of what is in production. And you see there that I have releases. Each of those tags, they represent a release. So this has been released to production. If I need to do a hotfix, yeah, I create a quick branch right over here. And then that quick branch is then merged back into production, which is what we still do today with those short-lived feature branches that I was referring to before. So what we're talking about being against is that, okay, long-lived branches for developing features. There was a company I worked with, so I got there and they wanted me to help them reduce the number of branches that they had. In a previous slide, I mentioned that the problem with feature branches is that if you do not have the discipline of merging them back together, eventually you're going to run out of, not time, but you don't have enough time to actually go back and do all the work that's related, to getting a full version that you developed over a year, and now you have to merge it back with whatever is out there in main. Nobody does that. At this company, they had 50 branches of the same main original application. It was like this. Every customer could actually get their own features by pointing, by providing $1 million. So here's $1 million. I want this, and then that feature. Okay, all right. New branch, do it. So, well, they're a rich company. They had 50 customers, right? At the least 50 branches. And well, the problem is that now what do you do with hot fixes, with security fixes? After 5 years of doing this, now they have 50 mains that they could not merge back. So I was there for several weeks. I was able to bring it down to 5 branches, 5 mains, or 5 branches, which I was personally not still happy, but they were really ecstatic. When you don't have anything, you're happy about anything you can provide, right? So they're really ecstatic that I was able to help them with bringing them back into at least 5 branches. And but it's not what we want to do. This is untenable. Now, why do we branch then? We have so many features. So in this case, they have 50 variations of the same feature. And the guys from PayPal, they're really good too. They're very, very professional, very, very adept at doing that. And they maintain those features. They had a very good way, very good cadence. So it can be done. But nowadays, the more features you have, the more customers you have, the more markets you have to attend to, the more branches you'll have to create. 50 and plus, it's just untenable. You can't maintain that. You got to simplify that. So if you go and look for Git flow, even in his own original article, listen, he made a comment about his own article from 10 years before, and he said that today he wouldn't use it. Today, he said, you got to go into trunk-based development. So Nissan himself, the original creator of this method, is not advocating for it anymore. And here, it's very clear that idea that I was referring to about creating a branch for testing. You see here how I was doing development in main, and now I have to stabilize this version that is going to be version 1.0, and now I have to, primarily get for a couple of iterations. So let's say, for instance, that I have iterations going on here, and I'm gonna, just add some lines here as maybe marking iterations. Right? Or that's the cadence of the project, right? So it would mean, for instance, that maybe you have an entire iteration for testing done there. And in between, what you have in here is that in this particular situation here in this particular location is that you have software that has been, finalized, but that really hasn't been tested. Who is looking at this? Well, Agile obviously recommends you focusing on working software. And that's the thing that I was saying, that a lot of people do not understand that working software means tested software that has some valuable features, and not simply built software that has been through a build, which is amazing that I have to explain this at other companies over and over, because people keep forgetting that we have to focus on the operations as well, right? So this is one of the keystones of DevOps, working software over comprehensive documentation. And if you look into the principles, right, the principles are even clearer than that. Our highest priority is to satisfy the customers through early and continuous delivery of valuable software, deliver working software frequently, from a couple of weeks to a couple of months, preferably in the shorter time scale, and then working software as the primary measure of progress. Don't tell me that you've done unless you actually show me the money, show me that working application in front of me. Again, just remembering the principles that we started with, we should be testing our software all the time so we can guarantee that it is in a known working state, and that when I merge it into main, it works. It's been tested. But how do I do this with big companies? Testing requires sometimes huge investments in environments for testing the software. Notice that this presentation is based a lot on what you do for web development and big companies with big web properties. I'm waiting to hear from you here, in this room, from Emerson, maybe about what do you do, what problems do you have for deploying software for that is related to hardware. But let's just focus for a minute on the challenges that those big companies have. You have a web farm, maybe of 1,000 servers, and now you have to test that software that you're about to deploy to 1,000 servers. How do you do that? So there's always been this fight between, okay, I want to simplify my development. I want to do everything in main, but main has to be the image of what's in production. How do I avoid breaking it up all the time? I want to emphasize this is that just go with it and deploy everything to production, or at least in something that mimics production enough so that you can avoid all those conflicts later in not having the proper environment for testing, something that is different for production from production. Does anyone here work with testing? No? Typically, that's the point where somebody raises their hand and say, well, I don't agree with you. And I agree that this is not a solution that fits everyone. This pattern of blue, green, and canary is something that big companies creating software that is for millions of people, let's say the Amazon website, purchasing websites, right? Commerce websites, MSN, or the Microsoft public properties, Office, anything that you have to have a cloud service that is going to be used by millions of people. You just don't have a way to replicate that environment. That's the reality. For smaller projects, yes, you can bring in and tear down and create an environment and do some load testing in that environment for smaller projects. But for big projects, you have to just embrace the fact that you just can't reproduce the environment. So the best way to doing this is by creating a subset of production as a stage environment. And then, as a matter of fact, some clouds like Amazon and Microsoft's, we have a facility called deployment slots. You deploy to this slot within your production environment, test it, Blue-green is about you bringing in load slowly. And one environment is the green environment, the new one, the new slots. And then you have the older current environment, which is the blue. You start to take users from the blue into the green. And then if something breaks, you immediately revert back. No problem taken. But if everything goes right, at the end of the process, you just switch. You turn the slot, then you switch. Now you have zero-time deployment. Obviously, I know that there are some complications there if you have dependencies such as databases and other services. I can give you references on how to deal with this if you want. We call that rolling forward with the database, and just basically, allowing for the software side to be cognizant of the two versions of that database. There's an entire article that explains that. But let's focus on this. It's the fact that it's becoming more and more prevalent, the idea of deploying to production for you to avoid that problem with testing, continuous testing. I want to test my software. It's got to be in a way where I can have my users look at it, working software. It's past the builds, past all the unit tests, but now I have to see it in, I have to fulfill that promise of continuous delivery of value that is in the Agile Manifesto. So what I want to point out is that in my experience, that doesn't work if you're not using feature flags. So you can't do trunk-based development without feature flags for big at-scale deployments. And this user group is exactly about Agile at scale. You can actually do away with it for smaller teams or smaller projects, not use feature flags, but if you're going to do it at scale, you will have to be using feature flags. That's the only way for you to avoid that madness of 50 feature branches. Instead, you have at least 50 feature flags, and you just turn these on and off as needed. You have one single source of truth for all the customers. And that's what I wanted to bring that, a customer from, 12 years ago to. Okay, let's use some way of you having the same code base across all these customers, and you just show to whatever customer, whatever they need to see, right? There's a lot of planning that you have to do in order to do this for different customers, especially, from the product management side. But the technology is there today. It's beyond, me here in this call, in this presentation to talk about the feature flags in detail, or I could actually even do a demonstration here. But my point is that technology is out there. You enable hiding or showing features with flags as needed. And my proposition is, okay, if you want to do it at scale, you can only do it with feature flags. Same slice of the infrastructure. With Canary, you can also target each slice to a certain part of the user set. Canary stands for those users who are the first ones to try out a feature in a small environment. And if that feature dies in that environment, then you know that it's not ready yet. The name comes from that canary in the mine reference. Most of you will recognize that. Where being a smaller animal, then it will more easily be affected by whatever changes, and it might show first that something needs to be fixed. Obviously, they didn't let the canary die, and we won't let the application die. We will just basically take it off the deployments and then fix it and then redeploy it again to the same location, go through the same process again. Now, I want to hear from you here in the room. Those of you who are working with actual development of software for hardware integrated software, maybe embedded software. How do you guys deal with the problems of trying to implement trunk-based development? First of all, are you trying to implement trunk-based development already? Are you able to do this?
No, we don't do it yet, but that's our goal.
As far as.
Well, trunk-based development, but we have few features where we're targeting feature flags. And that, yeah, we do have some longer lived feature branches we were talking about. I think one thing on your chart you were showing, features,
Which one?
long-lived feature branches. I didn't see any merges like from main.
This one or
Yeah,
this
that
one?
one.
This one is the older way, right? It's the older. So which one you're talking about?
Well, yeah, this one.
We're putting back the-
Yeah, I don't see main going to. the feature.
Oh, yeah, it's actually right here. Every time that you create, because GitFlow, it's the older model, right? Prior to trunk-based development, you have two permanent branches. You have master, which represents what's in production, and developed, which is where you actually do development. So in a way, what you're doing here is that you're saying that this one is main for all intents and purposes. So everything you do for the feature branches here on the side, you merge back into develop. And then when you have stabilized it, then you merge it into main, master, or trunk. Which means that you have two levels of interaction from a feature into the actual main trunk there. This is a delay, and that delay has sometimes business repercussions. Every time that you have to do this, you're not ready to deploy. You're not ready to let things be launched into to the very public. The idea is to always be prepared at any point to just flip the bit, flip the feature flag to on, and then you're good to go. So you look at, it looks like you were very enthusiastic about feature flags. Can you say anything about it?
So we've been talking about the feature flags for probably about 3 years. We know it's the key to making this work. We have some, I don't think there's unique challenges to the industry. We have some challenges. That is, it's one thing to turn features on and off in the UI. But when you consider things like databases, schemas, kind of the infrastructure part of things, it gets a little bit harder to turn those things on and off. Right? So we've been, I think, struggling a little bit on do that.
I can help you with, there is a very interesting reference that was tried and, and worked really well for the Visual Studio team system, now Azure DevOps. I'll give you that article reference at the end, and that's the one that I was referring to rolling forward with the database changes and having your service integration components. We're actually using microservices, being able to talk to many different versions of the database. So pretty much I just summarized what it is about, but yeah, it's doable.
The other thing I would say,
Clementino, can you repeat the questions, by the way? Because we
Yeah,
can't
so
hear you.
you can hear them? Oh, interesting.
Okay.
That's why you need that microphone because of the way the system works.
Oh, I see. So
That's
I'll
totally
repeat.
separate.
yeah. So there were two questions, one related about this diagram that I was just referring to, the GitFlow one, about how we didn't have any merges back from master into develop. And I was explaining basically that it does at the beginning of each cycle, right? There'll be if you look into this, there is an initial branching here out of master, and then develop becomes the new master. And the second, the question that I asked to a gentleman here, what's your name? Marty is here, and then Marty was very enthusiastic when I mentioned about feature flags. And I was asking him what was interesting about feature flags, and he just allowed me to know that one of the challenges they've been thinking about feature flags is the implementation of database changes alongside with business components and UI components. So how do you deal with that? And I was referring to there are many ways of dealing with this. One of them, exactly using that technique of rolling forward the database changes. Any other questions? And Leland, I don't have let's see here in the chat.
Yeah, there's actually one that on the feature flag topic, Ned basically says if you have 10 feature flags, you're going to have 2 to the 10th test cases. So like a test case explosion. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, that's the reason why we have products like dark launching or launch darkly, right? I know it's either you have the test case explosion or geometric explosion using feature flags, or you have to do the same very thing by doing it manually. So what I notice is that a lot of people that advocate doing manual testing, they kind of fool themselves in thinking that there will be not that test case explosion. Of course there is. What feature flags do is that they make it mathematically predictable what you're going to be getting in terms of testing all that. Now, the way that I like to deal with this—
and they're predictably exponential.
Exactly.
That's my point.
Yeah. But the way that I like to deal with this is that decoupling components or breaking down your application into components that can have different life cycles. If you can get your application broken down into components then that will be deployed as microservices, and that they have different deployment life cycles capabilities, what you can do is that you can establish that this component is in a stable version, doesn't have to be retested again, right? And if it has feature flags associated with it, they're supposed to be stable as well. So that is more like a question related to testing techniques than to the branching side of things. You will always have to deal with test case. Well, you said the exponential. I've heard also geometric, but I think it's exponential in my experience.
So I have a comment. So if you have, assuming he's talking about turning 10 feature flags on, it's like the testing with them off would be less testing, right? You would think, than turning it on.
Well,
one could be on and the other's off, or 2 of them on and the other's off. So if every combination of flags being—
yeah, the permutation, yeah. That's what he's talking about, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it seems like it might be less testing if they're off, but sure, than on. But
Yeah, and Sherry, I think is talking about that. Establish that this component is a stable version, right? That idea, and I probably should have also added at this presentation. Not only you have to have feature flags, but also you have to do component-based development. But that's yet another presentation. But Sherry is making the comment here to everyone, and that exactly. As a matter of fact, in most companies that I've been working with, what we do is that we have what we call LTS components or long-term support component within the company. It's not something that you're sharing externally, but within the company say, hey, this is my long-term supported feature. In a way, what you're doing then, you're transferring that feature branch to a separate component line development that's completely isolated, which also decreases the amount of time for that specific users of that component. So, Sherry was mentioning that she's just taking notes. Those are actually Clementino comments. Well, if I said that, let's say that you put it very nicely. Thank you, Sherry. All right.
Yeah, we did actually have one way back in the chat from Vera of how trunk-based development would work for applications that maybe have a lot of data checked into a repo. And she was specifically also thinking about things like SQL stored procedures, which can get rather unwieldy and lengthy.
You know what? I'm going to stop sharing for a minute, and then I'm going to share my whole screen, and I'll go directly into that article. Then give me just a sec, because it seems like it's something that everybody is interested in. let me just go here and
Article, I can post it.
And Leland is going to post it as well as part of the post. We have about 10 minutes. The presentation is over, right? By the way, that was the last slide, Leland, and then I'll do a very final conclusion, and then we can adjourn if you need to, and then we can leave the rest of the time for that. So let me now share my screen again. First, I need to find the article. This is going to be rolling forward. Yes, this is the article managing, well, actually, no, not this one. There's another one, but I'm going to be sharing first. Let me go ahead and share again. This time I'm sharing my whole screen. And this is actually it's on the DevOps Center. And it's here on the side, operate reliable systems. Eliminate downtime through version service releases, version service updates. So this article here was a presentation done, and I'll give you the YouTube video to it in just a minute. Leland is going to add that as part of the deliverables. But in summary, update the layers of the software separately. By that, I mean microservices, right? And meaning that also I have microservices that will talk to SQL, to other databases, and so on. Can anybody see that? Yeah. Roll forward only with the data tier. Have the other tiers able to understand the current version of the database and the previous version of the database. Does that ring a bell? And then the article continues here talking about the sequence. And well, this obviously has some implications about the operation, the ongoing operations as well. It's based off an original article that was published several years ago, maybe 5-6 years ago. And they themselves were using this as something that was a best practice, not only there, but other places. But let me share with you here the YouTube version of it, which is the one by Buck Hodges. And wow, it's taking forever to, I'm just going to give you the link. I'm not going to obviously share anything here right now. So he was talking about how VSTS, or now Azure DevOps, was migrated from being an on-premises application to becoming a cloud application, and how what did they have to do in order to be able to now, instead of maintaining one single database on a server, they now had to update 1,000 databases in the cloud. The same application, when you build it, it builds both the cloud version and the on-premises version. It's the same code. And that's the engineering behind this is just fantastic. And he was able to show, this presentation coupled with that article explains that question really well. So Ben, do we have any other questions before we close here? And I'll put the link immediately in the chat, both the YouTube one and the.
Yeah, thanks for doing that. I do have one other question from back in the chat. Do you want to get those copied in and then we'll go over it?
Yeah, let me go there.
Okay.
My difficulty here is actually going through the. I wish there was a way to take that bar from the top. And here's the article, the corresponding article. And there's also another one there on the operations of this application, but it's by Ed Glass. It's another one. Ping Leland, and then I can follow up with any questions that
Okay.
might arise from this
Yeah,
presentation.
we can, yeah, we could definitely get those links out on the meetup page so that everybody has them. The other question that we had from the chat from John Hill, I once coached a team with an application with 17 code variations for 17 different customers, supporting 17 code branches, one per customer. For this scenario, is there any way to maintain a single trunk, or is this actually 17 different applications, even though most of the code base was shared? And does anyone-
This is John. I think that Clementino spoke to all of this. So I think I understand his point, and the question's been resolved for me unless anybody else has anything around it.
All right. Actually, I thought about an even worse scenario than you, John. I dealt with 50. The way that we dealt with that is that we had to componentize everything, isolate the common components across all those different 50 versions that I dealt with. Once we extracted the 50 separate subsections that were reusable across each application, we mapped each of the remaining features that were not common into separate branches. We were able then to put together or merge those branches into, at the end, 5. But you could continue with the process of extraction and merging, and then at the time they were reluctant in using feature flags for several reasons. There was not a very good tool to manage feature flags other than primarily using some hard-coded items here and there, and if then ifs or pragmas, and it was a C++ series of applications. So the older the technology, the more problematic it is.
Yeah, and
Any
this group also had separate development environments, acceptance testing, different UAT. They had those 3 environments times 17, which was another.
This other customer had 50 environments. They had 50
Yeah.
environments. That was another reason why they wanted to merge everything. It was just becoming unwieldy to maintain a separate infrastructure for everything.
This was a long time ago too, so thank God things have improved.
All right, everyone. I'm going to show you the last slide. The last slide. In summary, trunk but verified. It's a on-purpose pun here. Use trunks with short-lived branches. Most tools will allow this nowadays. As a matter of fact, if you use Azure DevOps or GitHub, the UI allows you to, as you are in the work item, you click the work item for that task, you open a branch, you start working on your own little branch, you finish the task, it'll ask you, do you want to close the branch? Yeah, and you close it immediately. And then you do the proper, merge process with review back into main. Use feature flags to develop features in parallel and test continuously in a subsection of the production environment, if you can afford that. If not, then you'll have to think other strategies. That last bullet, I don't think that the industry has a very good solution for that yet. But I think that, when I say a very good solution, meaning a universal solution, meaning that it's the way that I have there is the way that you can do that for big web properties that cater for millions of people. But if you do have, for instance, embedded development, or if you have, you have to develop an application that will be deployed to a pipeline at Exxon, for instance. How do you test that application without having an actual pipeline to deploy to? So those are different kinds of problems. And I want to thank everyone here for being here today, being very participative. I have a very attentive crowd here in front of me. I'll see you next time in the next presentation when Leland gives me the opportunity to talk about these topics again. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Clementino.
Thank
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Back to you, Ben.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And thanks a lot to everyone for attending from Agile Austin. And we'll be ending on time here. And thanks for all the great questions. Like I said, I'll post the links. We'll eventually have the recording that we'll post back to the meetup page as well. And Yep, we will see you next month. So take care, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.